In the words of Walt Disney, all our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Born on the 14th of December 1934, Shyam Benegal dared to have a dream. At a tender age of 12, when he got his first camera from his photographer father Sridhar B. Benegal, Shyam Benegal hasn't stopped feeding our hungry minds with the most wonderful cinema, documentaries, television shows, books et al. Being a proud recipient of various awards, his unmatched talent is as great as his humble personality. Travel with me through the journey of one of the finest filmmakers of all times, the legend Shyam Benegal, only on the Bollywood Dynasty.
My father was a still photographer. He had a studio, photographic studio, in the cantonment area of Hyderabad, Sikandrabad actually. And he was also very, enthusiastic amateur filmmaker. When I say amateur filmmaker, I mean he had a 16mm film camera and he used to make films, particularly about his own family, because he raised a very large family, because we are, all the siblings together, all my brothers and sisters together, we are 10. And so he was kept very busy making films about his children. So he normally made a film about, from the day one of his children was born until the next child came, he was shooting a film about that child. So all of us in my family have films about each one of us, from age 0 to about age 2, And those films he used to put together, and on special occasions, when there were guests over for dinner, or friends over, or children clamoring to see the films that he had made, he would organize a show at home. So we would put up a white bed sheet and then he'd bring his projector and we would see these films of all of us, of different children. And then of course we gave commentaries for our own films. And sometimes the others gave commentaries. If we were saying positive things about ourselves, the others would say negative things. So it was actually the sense of being part of films was there from the time I was born. So it was nothing new for me. And also later, you see, as I was growing up, we had a cinema very close to our home. And that cinema was meant especially for the army that was lodged there, in the cantonment. And they used to show, because I grew up, I was born before independence, so even the British was still there when I was about 5-6 years of age. So the theatre used to show English films for 2 or 3 days of the week, and the remaining days they used to show Indian films. So there was a constant change of films every week. I had made friends with the projectionist. So I would see films from the projection booth. And I've never missed a single film. Although my parents did not encourage it, because they said, you should be studying, not just watching films all the time. But even then, I must have seen hundreds and hundreds of films like that. And films were a very familiar form of entertainment for me. It was nothing terribly special. So I saw American films, British films, Indian films, Hindi films, Telugu films because I happened to be in Hyderabad, Tamil films, South Indian films. So I was very familiar with generally the kind of films that were being made in our country. And so it's very easy to get excited about cinema and wanting to make films. So that's how I made my first film when I was 12, because my father 16mm camera was there. And so we shot the film, and it was, we used to live in a fairly large house as a child, when I was a child. And we used to have lots of cousins and people coming for summer vacations to spend with us. So it used to be a grand party, for about 2-3 weeks every summer. And that was the time I decided to make a film. And it was a lost and found story. It was about, we go on a picnic and one of the children gets lost. And so everybody then decides to find out where that child is. And that's how the whole adventure develops. So that was the story. And it was called Chuttiyon Mein Mauj Maza. So that was the film. So that was the film I made when I was about 12. And soon after that, another thing happened. Because one of my cousins, who in fact was a dancer because he was studying with Uday Shankar in Almora, and later on he became a dancer. His name was Guru Dutt. And he became a filmmaker himself. And he was the first person who was part of the family who had become a filmmaker. So he became a great figure of inspiration for me. And in fact, as soon as I finished college, the first thing I did was come to Bombay, hoping that I could work with him. But he had so many assistants. So I would have been one of the many assistants. I didn't want to do that. So I gave up the idea. Instead, I joined advertising. And when I joined advertising, I became a copywriter. But for me, more than writing copy, it was more interesting to make films. And in those days, this is pre-television. So in those days, there used to be advertising films that were made. They're made now also, but now they're shown on television. In those days, they used to be shown in the cinemas. And they used to be longer, because many of them used to be 1 minute, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, like that. So I decided that I was going to make advertising films, and the agency where I worked encouraged me. So I started making films. So I was making many films. I would make about 150, 180 films in a year. So I was very, very busy, writing, shooting, editing, recording, putting films together, showing to the clients, all that sort of thing. So that was my university as far as filmmaking was concerned. I learned how to make films by making advertising films. So when I made my first feature film, I had already made any number of advertising films, and I had also made quite a number of documentary films. So you see, it was and I didn't make a feature film until quite late in my career, because I was already 38 when I made my first feature film, Ankur. So I remember when I made that film, one of the things that, I was screening my film for several people before it was actually released. And one of the people who saw the film was Mr. Raj Kapoor. And he, immediately afterwards, after seeing the film, he telephoned me and he said, "You're telling a lie, this is not your first film." I said, "What do you mean it's not my first film?" He said, "A first filmmaker, वो तो बिल्कुल पहचाने जाते हैं, so editing में जैसे shooting किया है, the narrative style से, लेकिन ये सब चीज़ आप में नहीं है. You have made a film that is properly edited, properly told, the story is properly told. This can't possibly be your first film." So I said, "It's not my first film, it's my first feature film." There's a difference. Because I had been making films since I was about 22, 23 years of age, but those were advertising films. So this was the first time I'd made a feature film. After that, of course, I never looked back. I continued to make films until today. So that was how it all started.